Hello everyone and welcome to the HODLCast. We have a jam-packed episode for you today. We're going to be going through the Blockfi bankruptcy, the Celsius case, and the updates with FTX. So Blockfi is looking to restart customer withdrawals for anyone that had crypto just in their wallets. So not crypto that they've lent it to, other investors or that they were earning any yield on, but if they just had it straight in their wallet. After I read the bankruptcy court filing, my first thought was, geez, I wonder if it's such an important issue because maybe many of the founders have assets sitting on those wallets, but those details will be disclosed through the bankruptcy filings. Everything will come to light as to who owns assets there. It's a good move to get customers any money back that they can at this early stage. We saw in the Celsius bankruptcy that this issue was actually contested for 6 months, and huge legal fees that were paid by the creditors had to be used to litigate this issue. So it's nice that in Blockfi they're just conceding that those assets belong to the customers. If approved, the value of the crypto wallets will likely get a return of 80 cents on the dollar, and there's still a question as to how this money will be refunded. Will it be in kind, like whatever Bitcoin or Ethereum was on people's wallets, will they just get 80 cents on the dollar worth of that back, or will it be paid out in cash? Blockfi did just liquidate $250 million worth of assets, and when they filed for bankruptcy, they indicated that they had somewhere in the 1 to 10 billion range of liabilities. So if it's 250 million liquidated against a 1 billion liability, then we're at 25%. But if it's closer to the 10 billion in liabilities, 250 million is not going to go very far. In its motion, Blockfi argued that the crypto held in Blockfi wallets belongs to the customers, and what it said was the company has no legal or equitable interest in funds that were frozen when the platform halted the operations on November 10th. Basically, once they filed for bankruptcy, there were still some transactions that posted saying that they had processed further customer activity, but in their motion they clarified that was an error, and no action happened on any of the transactions after November 10th at 8:15 p.m. Blockfi is seeking a similar relief in Bermuda, so anyone with assets just in the wallets should be able to get that money back. The court hearing is set for January 9th, 2023. The Celsius saga. So this one is, continuing. The claim deadline is January 3rd. So if customers have any disagreement with Celsius's calculations of what value they had on the platform at the time of bankruptcy, they have to get these claims in by January 3rd and any counterclaims. And boy, after my recent podcast with bankruptcy attorney Ido Alexander, it became apparent that these creditors in the EARN program, they really need to lawyer up. Trying to go it alone and just hoping that the Committee for Unsecured Creditors is going to take care of their needs is not enough. You need an ad hoc committee that's specifically focused on your individual needs, because anyone that is an unsecured creditor can also include people that were in business. For example, Core Scientific took out a loan with Celsius where Celsius borrowed nearly $1 billion in mining equipment. And then the Unsecured Creditors Committee, they equally represent people like Core Scientific who have business dealings but are not in the EARN program. So everyone's interest is different, and you need to make sure you have someone there representing your interest. So far, the lawyers on behalf of the Celsius bankruptcy have racked up $52 million in legal fees. So there's big battle being fought for these assets, and if you're not represented, you're not really in that fight. Tiffany Fong recently shared some transaction data. So a former Celsius employee sent all this to her. It was private transactions, and it revealed that Alex Mashinsky actually moved 18 million worth of various tokens off the Celsius platform in a private account. So he claims he only moved 2 million from his public account, right before the bankruptcy, which is still despicable behavior. You go down with the ship if you're the CEO. You don't move 2 million off the account the days before you file bankruptcy. But on top of that 2 million, there was another 18 million that he was trying to hide. He might say that he did that transaction just to settle certain tax liabilities, but he's actually someone that went on video countless times saying, oh, don't ever sell your Bitcoin for tax, just take out a loan on it so you can pay your tax. So even if he was taking 18 million worth of tokens out to settle various tax obligations, why wouldn't he follow his own advice there? And then, geez, this guy, Zach on Twitter, he's since taken his whole Twitter account down, but he was a big marketing personality with the Celsius, community. And someone searched his old tweets with, the word girl and the word chick in it. And God, they were really raunchy. And some stuff he put is just like quite racist. So incredible to think a company like Celsius had someone like this tweeting out these insane tweets while actively representing Celsius. And then Voyager case. So we have CZ, the CEO of Binance, bidding on Voyager's assets. Now, if you remember a few months ago, SBF was bidding on those assets. So it's like, hopefully not a foreshadowing. That was one of FTX's last public transactions. And now CZ's coming in, doing all the right things to boost his credibility, to show that Binance is solvent. He had CryptoQuant put out a report saying that the on-chain liabilities look to be true. So everything that's held in customer accounts is certainly accounted for. Michael Berry, the infamous Big Short, he says that the proof of reserve audits are completely meaningless for crypto. And I think what he's alluding to is the risk that the entire corporate structure could be taking on value against Binance equity. Where are they getting $1 billion to make an investment like this in Voyager, and where did they get the $500 million to invest in Twitter? Are they loaning out or pledging equity in Binance? In which case, even if they have a one-to-one backing, if someone calls that equity, then if Binance is engaged in a variety of lending and investing activity, they could have to liquidate some BNB tokens, and if that became unstable, it could also result in a problem for Tether. So that's kind of the risk here, what people are looking into. On the news of CZ coming in to buy up the Voyager assets, the Voyager stock shot up 87%. So it went up to 7 cents from 3 cents, but now it's gone back down to 3 cents. This same stock was worth $27 a share, and now it's worth 3 cents. So if we move on to the SBF FTX updates. So after spending a few days in the Fox Hill prison, which is reportedly full of rats and human waste, that people had to poop in buckets, and it looked really, really horrific. There were maggots, not enough beds for everyone. He was probably held in a medical unit for most of the time. I don't think he was with the general population that had those horrible conditions, but either way, he moved to the US and stand for charges at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York, which is also the same place where Epstein killed himself, the same place where Ross Albright had to wait for his trial, where he got that draconian sentence of double life plus 40 years. Now, SBF, after, he went to that Metropolitan Correctional Center, he had hearing, he was let out on $250 million worth of bail, which was pledged against his parents' house in California, and he was allowed to go there on house arrest at the moment. So he's allowed out he's got an ankle monitor on, and he's allowed out for mental health treatment and drug addiction treatments. A huge upgrade for him compared to that Fox Hill prison. He'll be probably back on Twitter Spaces and, playing video games in no time later this afternoon. Caroline Ellison and Gary Wang were also charged. They were charged by the SEC, CFTC, and Department of Justice. The SEC complaint alleges that Caroline and Gary participated in a scheme to defraud investors. FTX raised more than $1.8 billion, some of which was from U.S. investors that bought an equity stake in FTX. And when they bought that stake, they believed FTX had appropriate risk management controls in place, and that was a lie. So that's, leads to the fraud. It's alleged that Caroline and Gary engaged in conduct that was critical to the success of FTX. So without their help, FTX wouldn't have succeeded in its giant, massive fraud. They furthered SBF's scheme to build a crypto empire on stolen funds. The complaint also alleges that the FTT token is an investment contract and therefore a security. One thing though that they didn't say in the complaint was that the FTT token was sold to US investors. So if they really wanted these charges to stick, we'd have to have some kind of allegation for that. And SEC went as far as mentioning that these tokens were not actually available on FTX US. Still lots to charge with, but the security fraud on the FTT token is not looking like it happened in the US. The CFTC complaint is pretty juicy. There's a lot of information in there, some new information that I hadn't read before. It alleges that SBF directed Ellison and others to misappropriate FTX deposits for Alameda's benefit, and this was not disclosed or known by FTX customers, which is a violation of the Commodities Exchange Act. The complaint also alleged that Alameda enjoyed certain essential and undisclosed benefits and privileges on the FTX exchange that were programmed into the code by Gary Wang at SBF's direction. Alameda was exempt from FTX's auto liquidation risk engine functions that would liquidate a customer's position if they got a margin call. No liquidation for Alameda. That's not hardly fair. Alameda could also execute transactions even if it didn't have assets in its account to cover. So normally when you're placing a trade, you have to have the assets at least within 3 days to settle the trade that you've placed, but they're letting that account, place trades without covering. Alameda had an unlimited line of credit, which they used at one point up to $10 billion. By mid-22, FTX's internal ledger showed a balance for Alameda of $8 billion. It was far greater than FTX's lifetime revenue, yet FTX publicly represented that they were highly profitable and liquid. So that was, a big lie, knowing that they had this big loan of $8 billion. With that giant hole in the balance sheet, FTX pursued the acquisition strategy, like for example, of saying they were going to buy Voyager's assets in hopes of gaining different sources of capital they would later be able to use to fill this big hole. Then later, at Sam Bankman-Fried's direction, FTX executives reallocated Alameda's debt across FTX accounts. They put it into an account called Korean Friend Account, or the Weird Korean Account, and it wasn't labeled as an Alameda sub-account. It was just an attempt to hide the debt. And then in September 22, SBF shared a document internally titled "We Came, We Saw, We Researched," and it was contemplating shutting down Alameda research, but no action was ever taken. One of the things he said in that memo was, "The fact we didn't hedge as much as we should have cost more in expected value than all the money Alameda has ever made or will ever make. In the current environment, capital is expensive and Alameda just doesn't justify it." On November 7th, right in the CFTC complaint, they put a picture of his tweet when SBF said, "A competitor is trying to go after us with false rumors. FTX is fine. Assets are fine." So, that was clearly a lie. Caroline and Gary were charged with fraud against all customers and fraudulent statements of material fact and material omissions. So Caroline Ellison pleaded guilty to the following charges. She said, count 1, engaging in a conspiracy to commit wire fraud on FTX customers. She pled guilty. Count 2, aiding and abetting in wire fraud, engaging to commit wire fraud on lenders of Alameda Research, wire fraud on lenders of Alameda Research, conspiracy to commit commodities fraud, conspiracy to commit securities fraud with respect to FTX investors, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. So the maximum sentence for all these charges is 110 years. But CoinDesk just, moments ago put out a report that she has apparently taken a plea deal for $250,000, an asset forfeiture, and surrendering her passport at the moment. So we'll see what happens to Miss Caroline. So the Core Scientific bankruptcy was a novel pre-packaged filing, so it saved a lot of efficiencies where they just put the package already together. Core Scientific is partly going bankrupt because they loaned equipment to Celsius. They had a $1 billion equipment loan. It doesn't say that that's all from Celsius, but we know at least some of it is. And they didn't get repaid on this loan, and both the value of mining equipment and the value of Bitcoin are down a lot, and electricity costs are increasing. So miners are struggling already, and then if you have a $1 billion loan that doesn't get repaid, it doesn't really help. The company is still mining during its restructuring, and they're basically just reworking the cap table so they spread their debt among their shareholders and kind of update the equity positions, and as long as the court approves, it'll go through. The shares have actually lost 98% of their value since 2022. That's it for today. If you like this content, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thanks everyone, and have a happy holidays.